The first time my boyfriend seriously asked me where I kept every password to our bank and investment accounts, I almost answered him. That was the terrifying part. Not because I was stupid. Because after 7 years together, trusting Charles still felt automatic. 3 weeks later, I would hear his voice on a hidden recorder calling me a trusting idiot, while explaining exactly how he planned to empty our accounts and start a new life with another woman. My name is Adele Beckett. I'm 33. And at the time this happened, I worked in IT infrastructure for a healthcare company. Charles Davis and I had been together for 7 years and living together as committed partners for 4. For most of that time, we were annoyingly happy. We had inside jokes nobody else understood, turned grocery shopping into entertainment, and spent half an hour choosing movies only to rewatch the same ones. I handled our finances. Charles handled our social life. I genuinely thought we'd figured out adulthood. My parents disagreed. My older sister Caroline had always been their success story, the doctor with the beautiful house and perfect marriage. Then there was me, the daughter who worked in IT and apparently never presented herself correctly enough for my mother. Ironically, they loved Charles. Sometimes I thought they liked him more than they liked me. "He brings you out of your shell," Mom would say. I ignored it. Charles was my person. Until a few months ago, when something changed. It started with his phone. Charles used to leave it everywhere. Kitchen counter, couch, bathroom sink. Sometimes he'd shout from another room for me to answer it. Then suddenly he carried it everywhere, bathroom included. I joked one morning, "What happened? Running an international crime syndicate?" He laughed. "Work stuff." 3 days later, he added a password. Then came the calls. His phone would ring and he'd immediately step onto the porch or disappear into another room. Who was that? Someone from work. Never a name. Never a story. Just enough information to make another question sound unreasonable. Our bank statements changed too. Restaurants I didn't recognize. Cocktail bars downtown. One charge from a hotel lounge. Nothing catastrophic. Just strange. "What's the loft?" I asked after noticing a $75 transaction. "Drinks with coworkers." His answer came too quickly. I looked at him for a moment. Charles shrugged. "People try new places, Adele." Soon he was working late twice a week. Then 3 times. 9 to 5 became 7:30, sometimes 8. And our conversations changed with him. We used to talk about everything. Now we talked like polite roommates. Milk, trash, packages. When I mentioned taking the Hawaii trip we'd dreamed about for years, Charles actually looked startled. "Hawaii? Next year." He looked down at his plate. "Maybe we shouldn't plan that far ahead." That was when fear finally replaced confusion. A Wednesday afternoon made it worse. Charles told me he was meeting a coworker for coffee. I happened to be nearby buying my nephew a birthday gift, so I drove toward the cafe thinking I might surprise him. Instead, I saw Charles outside, alone, pacing beside the building with his phone pressed against his ear. I stayed in my car. Something about his posture stopped me. Through my cracked window, I caught fragments. "It's almost ready." Then, "Just a little longer." And finally, "We can start fresh." My stomach dropped. I drove home without telling him I'd seen him. That night, I deliberately asked, "How was coffee?" Charles smiled while opening the refrigerator. "Good. Marcus is having relationship problems." Spent an hour giving him advice. I stared at his back. Marcus was in Denver for a conference. I'd seen his airport photos that morning. Charles apparently forgot. I said nothing. 2 nights later, over pasta, Charles casually asked, "You know what we should do?" "What?" "Organize all our financial stuff." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "What financial stuff?" "Accounts, passwords, investment documents, everything." "Why?" He smiled, but his eyes didn't. "Emergencies." "What emergency requires every password?" He laughed. "You work in IT. Aren't you supposed to love organization?" I smiled back. Inside, every alarm I had was screaming. The next morning, I bought a small voice-activated recorder. I hated myself while paying for it. I hated myself more when I hid it behind old shoe boxes beneath our bedroom dresser. For 2 days, nothing happened. Laundry, television, normal work calls. I started wondering whether I'd become exactly the paranoid partner I never wanted to be. Then Charles left Saturday morning for another coffee. I waited 20 minutes, retrieved the recorder, pressed play. 43 minutes in, I heard him. "Yeah, I'm working on getting access to everything." I froze. A pause followed. Then Charles laughed. "She has no idea. Adele trusts me completely." My hands went cold. Another pause. "I just need the account information first. Once I know where everything is, we can move the money." Then came the sentence that destroyed whatever remained of the man I thought I knew. "She's a trusting idiot, Vanessa." Vanessa Reed, a woman from his marketing department. Charles had mentioned her before, always casually. Vanessa said this. Vanessa recommended that restaurant. Vanessa knew somebody in real estate. Then Charles's voice continued. "The Tampa house is perfect. Once this is done, we'll be gone before she understands what happened." I replayed it 3 times, not because I didn't understand, because some truths are so ugly your brain keeps requesting confirmation. Charles wasn't only cheating, he was planning to take our money and disappear. That night, after he fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling until nearly 4 in the morning. The next day, I checked the shared desktop. The browser history showed searches about transferring large sums and protecting money before separation. More importantly, I found an unsent message addressed to Vanessa containing balances from 2 of our accounts. I closed the computer, sat perfectly still, and realized Charles had underestimated me in exactly the wrong way. He thought trusting him meant I wasn't paying attention. I called my oldest friend, Nina Mercer. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she said quietly, "My cousin Daniel is an attorney. I'm not trying to destroy Charles." "Adele." Silence. "He is planning to take your money and disappear." Hearing somebody else say it made it real. Daniel met with me the next afternoon. He was careful about what I could legally protect, what remained jointly controlled, and what documentation I needed before doing anything. "Don't improvise," he warned, "and don't touch money that isn't legally yours." So I didn't. I documented statements, deposits, ownership records, transfers, messages, and everything else Daniel told me to preserve. The recording had told me what Charles intended. Now I needed evidence of what he actually did. I even called my parents, hoping they might temporarily help with one asset Daniel had suggested separating from the shared household structure. Mom barely let me finish. "This sounds paranoid." "I know what I heard." She sighed. "Maybe you misunderstood." Then Dad joined the call. Caroline would never handle relationship problems this way. There it was. My sister. Of course. I ended the call. That hurt, but it also clarified something. I knew exactly who I could depend on. Over the next week, following Daniel's instructions, I secured assets legally belonging to me and preserved complete records of everything shared. I left the joint account alone except for ordinary expenses. Charles saw exactly what he expected to see. Nothing alarming, nothing suspicious, nothing suggesting that his trusting idiot girlfriend already knew almost everything. And then, something strange happened. He became affectionate again. He cooked dinner, asked about my day, put his arm around me during movies. One evening, he kissed my forehead and said, "Feels like us again, doesn't it?" I looked up at him, smiled. Yeah. But I finally understood what the affection meant. Charles wasn't coming back to me. He thought he was almost finished using me. 2 days later, I casually mentioned that work was sending me out of town. 4 days, I said. His face changed for barely a second, but I saw it. Relief, excitement, opportunity. He kissed my cheek. "I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too." What Charles didn't know was that there was no business trip. I was staying 20 minutes away at Nina's apartment, and although I told him I'd return Friday night, I planned to walk through our front door Thursday afternoon, right around the time Charles usually called Vanessa. Thursday afternoon, I parked 2 streets from my own house. Nina looked at me from the driver's seat. You sure? No. That was the truth. But I'm going in. For 3 days, Charles had believed I was hundreds of miles away on a business trip. In reality, I'd been sleeping on Nina's couch while Daniel helped me organize financial records and prepare for whatever Charles did next. Daniel had been clear. Don't provoke him. If he initiates a transfer, let the records show exactly what he did. I walked the final 2 blocks alone. Charles's car was in the driveway. I unlocked the front door quietly. At first, I heard nothing. Then Charles laughed. It came from the kitchen. I stepped around the corner. Charles was sitting at the table with his laptop open and his phone beside it. 2 suitcases stood against the wall near the hallway. Already packed. For some reason, those suitcases hurt more than everything else. 7 years together reduced to 2 pieces of luggage waiting by the door. Charles hadn't noticed me. He typed something. Clicked. Waited. Then smiled. What are you doing? He nearly jumped out of the chair. Adele? His face went blank. I thought you were in Chicago. I came home early. For several seconds, neither of us moved. Then Charles looked at the laptop, at the suitcases, and apparently decided pretending was pointless. You weren't supposed to be back until tomorrow. That seems obvious. The panic disappeared from his face. Something colder replaced it. You know what your problem is? I said nothing. You trust people too much. He turned the laptop toward me. A transfer confirmation filled the screen. $30,000. You trusted the wrong person. There it was. 7 years. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every night I'd fallen asleep beside him believing we were building the same future, and Charles was smiling. You're too naive for this world, Adele. I looked at the confirmation, then at him. He seemed disappointed when I didn't scream. You were comfortable, he said. That's what you wanted. Same house, same routine, same boring plans. And Vanessa isn't boring? His expression changed, just slightly. That was enough. So it is, Vanessa. He stared at me before shrugging. I guess we're past pretending. He grabbed the suitcases. I wanted more. I moved aside. Charles stopped beside me. For a moment, he seemed to expect something. Begging. Anger. Anything that proved he still mattered enough to destroy me. Instead, I opened the door. I think you should go. His confidence flickered. Then he rolled the suitcases outside. Don't call me when reality hits. I closed the door behind him, locked it, and listened to his car disappear down the street. Only then did my knees start shaking. I sat on the floor, not because I wanted him back, because some ridiculous part of me had still hoped there was an explanation. There wasn't. I gave myself 1 minute. Then I called Daniel. He did it. How much? 30,000. Don't touch anything. Send me the transaction information. I contacted the bank about the disputed activity and secured whatever access could still legally be changed. The recording had warned me. The transfer gave Daniel something better: transaction records, login data, timestamps, and actual conduct. The digital trail didn't care what story Charles told afterward. For several hours, nothing happened. Then my phone buzzed. Charles. Why can't I access the other accounts? I didn't answer. 20 minutes later. Charles. Vanessa isn't answering. That got my attention. Daniel called shortly afterward. There may be another problem. What? The 30,000 went into an account Charles and Vanessa had opened together. I know. It isn't there anymore. I sat upright. What do you mean? Vanessa transferred it out shortly after it arrived. To Charles? No. I stared at the wall. Vanessa had access because she was a joint holder on the receiving account. Charles had planned to betray me. Vanessa had apparently planned to betray Charles. By midnight, 2 more messages appeared. Charles. She took it. I screwed up. Then, The next morning. Charles, you set me up. This is entrapment. Daniel's response when I forwarded that one was simple. Don't answer. I didn't. 48 hours after Charles left our house believing he'd won, he appeared at my office. I heard him before I saw him. You stole from me. Security intercepted him in the lobby. When Charles saw me behind the glass doors, he pointed straight at me. You changed everything. You tricked me. People were staring. I stayed where I was. Then one of the guards mentioned calling police. Charles immediately changed. Adele. His voice softened. Come on. We can fix this. 48 hours earlier, I'd been too naive for his world. Now, apparently, we were a team again. I turned around. Security escorted him outside. That evening, Daniel preserved the new messages and obtained the relevant financial records. Charles had initiated the transfer while believing I was away. The money had gone to the account he shared with Vanessa. The messages and computer records showed he'd been planning it beforehand. That was what mattered. The first serious meeting over the financial dispute happened the following week. Charles arrived with an attorney. He wouldn't look at me. His attorney began by portraying Charles as a financially vulnerable partner who'd discovered that I had deliberately hidden assets from him. Daniel let him finish. Then he placed the documentation on the table. The transfer, the account records, the digital communications. And finally, the unsent message to Vanessa containing balances from 2 of our accounts. Charles shifted in his chair. His attorney read the message, then read it again. He turned toward Charles. Did you write this? Charles swallowed. It was taken out of context. His attorney stared at him. What context makes a list of account balances better? Charles looked at me. I said nothing. Daniel then produced records connecting the financial activity to Charles's plans to relocate to Tampa. Charles leaned forward. This is insane. She was spying on me. Daniel didn't react. We're discussing the financial activity, Charles. That was exactly why we'd built everything around what Charles had done, rather than how I'd first become suspicious. By the end of the meeting, the aggressive demands from Charles's side had disappeared. His attorney requested time to review the evidence. I walked toward the elevators afterward. Adele. I stopped. Charles stood behind me. You think you've won? This isn't a game. You humiliated me. You transferred $30,000 while you thought I was out of town and left with packed suitcases. His jaw tightened. You're going to regret doing this to me. For 7 years, that tone would have scared me. Now it sounded desperate. I already regret trusting you, I said. That's enough. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. I thought that would be the worst part of the week. I was wrong. The next afternoon, someone started pounding on my front door. My mother stood outside. Dad was beside her. Mom didn't even say hello. How could you do this to Charles? I stared at her. What? He told us everything. Dad crossed his arms. You've taken this too far, Adele. They hadn't called to ask what happened or asked to see the evidence. Charles had told them a story, and once again, they'd chosen him. Mom looked at me with open disappointment. Caroline would never treat her husband this way. There it was, even now. You have no idea what Charles did. We know enough, Mom said. I looked at both of them. No, you know what Charles told you. Neither answered. I closed the door. 2 days later, Daniel called. He had finally reached Vanessa. She hadn't simply disappeared. She'd moved the $30,000 into an account Charles couldn't access because, according to her, she'd realized he had been lying to her too. She was willing to provide the messages and financial records she'd kept, but she wanted protection from Charles before she cooperated. Then Daniel went quiet. What? I asked. Vanessa says there's another woman. I closed my eyes. Another affair would barely have surprised me anymore. But that wasn't what Daniel meant. Charles had apparently been promising this woman a future too. And according to Vanessa, he'd been trying to get access to her money as well. The other woman's name was Rachel Monroe. She was 36, divorced, and had met Charles at his gym about 8 months earlier. And Vanessa was right. Charles hadn't just been sleeping with Rachel. He'd been running almost the same plan on her. Daniel arranged for Vanessa to speak with him before anyone contacted Rachel. She brought screenshots, account records, and messages from Charles. Charles had told Vanessa that I controlled him financially and that most of our savings were really his. The $30,000, according to Charles, was money he was taking back. That was why Vanessa had agreed to open the joint account. Then, days before the transfer, she saw a message from Rachel on Charles's phone and started digging. Charles had been telling Rachel that Vanessa was an obsessive coworker who wouldn't leave him alone. He'd promised Vanessa a new life in Tampa. He'd promised Rachel one in Austin. Then Daniel showed me the message that mattered most. Charles had written, "Once Adele's money is handled, I'll help you consolidate yours. Then we can finally start over without anyone controlling us." I read it twice. Consolidate? Daniel nodded. He'd already started asking Rachel about her savings. It suddenly became clear. Vanessa wasn't the mastermind who had stolen Charles from me. Rachel wasn't some second-rate love. They were both pieces on his board. And so was I. Vanessa admitted she'd moved the entire $30,000 from the account she shared with Charles because she realized he might disappear on her too. She hadn't spent it. The money was still sitting untouched in a separate account. On Daniel's advice, she agreed to cooperate with the bank and return the disputed funds through the proper process. Rachel agreed to cooperate too. Her screenshots showed Charles repeatedly asking about her savings and investments, while insisting that couples who trusted each other shouldn't keep financial secrets. I almost laughed when I read that phrase. Trust. Charles really loved that word when someone else's money was involved, but the ugliest lie was still waiting. At the next court hearing. Over the financial dispute, Charles submitted a written declaration. He claimed the $30,000 transfer had been agreed upon between us. According to him, we'd discussed moving the money weeks earlier as part of reorganizing our finances. He said I only called it unauthorized after our relationship ended. I stared at the document. He's saying I approved it? Daniel nodded. Under oath. That was the lie Charles dragged into court himself. And unlike the hidden recording that had first alerted me, we didn't need to rely on it to prove what happened. We had the transaction records, the account access logs, the messages to Vanessa, the Tampa discussions, and now, Vanessa herself. When the issue came up, Charles sat beside his attorney looking almost relaxed. Daniel asked him one simple question. You maintain that Adele approved the $30,000 transfer? Yes. And she knew where the money was going? Yes. To an account you shared with Vanessa Reed? Charles hesitated. His attorney shifted beside him. Yes. Daniel placed several pages on the table. Vanessa's messages showed Charles telling her to wait until I was away, before moving the money. Another message was even clearer. Adele leaves Wednesday. Thursday afternoon is safest. Exactly when he'd transferred it. Charles's face changed. Daniel didn't raise his voice. If Adele approved the transfer, why did you need to wait until she was out of town? Charles opened his mouth. Nothing came out. His attorney requested a break. That was the moment the story he'd been telling everyone finally collapsed. After that, Charles's financial claims collapsed quickly. The returned $30,000 was accounted for, and the rest was left for the attorneys and bank to sort out. I didn't need revenge. Charles was doing enough damage to himself. My parents finally learned the truth when Charles's contradictory statements became impossible to explain away. Dad called first. I think we made a mistake. You didn't know everything because you never asked. Silence. Caroline texted me later. For once, she didn't defend them. They shouldn't have compared us, and they shouldn't have chosen his story before hearing yours. I stared at that message for a long time. All those years I'd quietly resented Caroline for being the standard I could never meet, but she'd never asked to become that standard. My parents had done that. I replied, "Thank you." That was enough for now. Charles tried contacting me several more times. One message said, 7 years has to mean something. It did. It meant I knew exactly how convincing he could be. I blocked the number. Eventually, the financial dispute was resolved. He took his personal belongings. I kept the house. For the first few nights, the silence felt wrong. I kept expecting Charles's keys at the door or his voice asking what we should order for dinner. You don't stop missing 7 years just because you discover what someone did at the end of them. Sometimes I missed the Charles who planned ridiculous dates and could make me laugh after a terrible day. Then I understood something. I didn't have to decide that every good memory was fake. Maybe some of them were real. That didn't make what he eventually chose to do any less real. Nina helped me rearrange the house, repaint the bedroom, and get rid of the dining table where Charles had sat smiling over that $30,000 transfer. When we finished, I stood in the freshly painted room and realized that for the first time in months, my own home didn't feel like evidence. My parents still wanted me to put everything behind us. But forgiveness wasn't the same as restoring access. Caroline and I grew closer. Vanessa returned the money and disappeared from my life. Rachel got away before Charles reached her finances. As for Charles, the last I heard, he'd moved into a small apartment across town. I didn't ask for details. Sometimes I think back to the afternoon I walked into that kitchen. Charles sitting there, suitcases packed, $30,000 moving out of our account. That smile on his face when he said, "You trusted the wrong person." For a long time, I thought he was right. He wasn't. Trusting someone wasn't my mistake. Ignoring the moment their behavior stopped matching their words would have been. Charles thought trust made me weak. What he never understood was that once I knew the truth, I didn't need to beat him at his own game. I just needed to stop protecting him from the consequences of playing it. And when I closed the door behind him that Thursday afternoon, I wasn't watching my life disappear. I was finally taking it back.